Okay, I believe it started.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, we were just talking about nature and walking for anybody watching. But yeah, it was great, man. I like to go to different cemeteries, and I don't stay too long usually. I just kind of go in and out. But oddly enough, I heard Dolly Parton, an audio from Dolly Parton, say that she liked going to cemeteries because they're well kept, and it's nature, and it's interesting because there's history there to see all the graves and stuff and different dates on them. And I couldn't agree more with her. It's just such a peaceful, relaxing place, and there's not many people there. So you got like this beautiful like scenery all to yourself. So I highly recommend anybody who wants to spend time in nature definitely check out the graveyards because it's a untapped resource of peace.
Yeah. I think I remember my mom saying that good place to go for a picnic because of the reasons you
Yes.
in terms of it being well kept.
Yes. My mom used to take me. I'd go to work. I'd drive in the car to work with her sometimes, and we would go to graveyards and have lunch there. Long John Silver's, remember that place? I don't know. Well, maybe you don't remember. You're from Canada.
I remember I've been there like once, and that was it had to be like 6 or 7 years ago now, but back when I was driving a transport truck. So I was going
Oh,
through the
nice.
States. Stopped at a Long
Oh,
John Silver.
sweet. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah. Earlier last yesterday and a little earlier today, man, I was having like a pity experience that was seemed like different than like different than before because and it's funny, like I didn't even care to call it anything, but as I was going through it, I'm like, hey man, this is like a real pity experience I'm having right now, like a real like something was eating at me in my mind, and I just was doing the Eightfold Noble Path practice, and it just went away, and it really there was something subtly different about it where I really did get a feeling like, wow, like this is real. Like I
Hmm.
always said it was real. I always know it's real. But something was weird this time, like, because I guess this thing was weighing so heavily on my mind. And then, like, the fact that I just changed it and it wasn't weighing on my mind. And I'm like, I can be peaceful without needing this thing that I don't have and blah, blah, blah. And it was really wonderful. It was different. All I can say is like it was different than the other ones I've had. The other ones were like almost logically like, wow, I can do this. But this one was I really inside my like essence was like, man, I can really be content without this stuff. That's really cool, man. Anyways, yeah, it
Oh
was
yeah.
nice. Gave me a
Oh,
big boost of like Dhamma inspiration.
yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting, yeah, when that comes up, and especially like you said, like after, you're kind of going through something, but being able to actually see it, change and like really have that direct insight into that uh
Yeah.
is really reassuring.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, you really can do this. It's I mean, it's something too, and like when it comes to any of these experiences, I find like especially when we're talking about like the real feeling aspect, because like sometimes practicing, and if I'm like in seclusion and I'm working it in, it's just or it's being worked in, it can feel so good, and one actually like it actually feels, you know, um, incredibly
Yeah.
pleasant, right? But yeah, that kind of gives like, wow, this really can be done. One can actually just feel really good. And again, this is beyond like the discursive thought. This is more like a
Right.
direct
Right.
felt, like, through the
Right.
body, like, kind of thing. And
Yeah.
that can kind of give a degree of like, yeah, you know what, just being able to be content without anything really does give rise to that joy and fulfillment. Yeah.
Yeah. That's well said, man. Yeah, it's ironically, even though there's like no soul, but it's like you almost feel it in your soul, you know.
Yeah.
But when Westerners say that, what we really mean is like you feel it in your heart, the heart of your
Yeah.
being, so to speak. Um,
Yeah. It depends,
but
I,
yeah,
I guess,
man.
context of what one means by soul. So, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, we do often mean it like heart, right? So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. You feel it in your bones, man. Um, yeah, and that's great to. It's very tricky to be a human being sometimes because society just wraps your head around in that you really do. It appears difficult. It's not difficult, but it can appear difficult to some people, especially if they're not in Dhamma. It's like it really does get you tangled in its spider web of always needing something you don't have, always wanting something you don't have. And there's lots of people who go their whole lives without hearing the fact that, like, wait, you don't need any of that? Like, that's not a way to live. That's not a way to be. And so, yeah, the fact that you can hear the Dhamma and practice it is such another thing to, in a way, to rejoice over and be joyful over. It's yeah, just quite lovely, just really nice, and yeah, just feel pretty happy about all of it, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. To just be content, be okay. And then through that, just being content and being okay, like, joy really does arise, that feeling of success. Yeah.
Yeah,
And yeah, it's interesting too because like before actually the call, for a little bit, in terms of like mood and attitude, things have been, good on my end here. But I did was
yeah,
kind of going through a little bit of a sad thing for a little bit. I said, okay, I'm just gonna let myself be sad for a little bit. But it still kind of works it out. Like even when going through that, there's still like this wisdom of like understanding. Well,
yeah,
it's a lot of bullshit. Uh,
yeah,
yeah, but it is like what you say about like, especially when engaging with like the conventional sort of world, right? There's so much in terms of you need to have this in order to be happy. You need to be somebody in order to be happy. You need to be some idealized version of yourself in order to be happy, right? Or this thing, and you can't be happy without any of these things, right? And so I think for me, it was sort of like coming to also like, yeah, I know I can be content, I can be happy, um, without any of these things, right? But there is a sense where like one really, um, it almost, yeah, did feel like a grieving of identity there, and just being like, well, it's okay. Still, again,
yeah,
it works itself out, but there's like, to a certain degree, there's like these conditionings that one goes through, I guess, but it's just like seeing through them and working through them like one at a time, right? And so,
yeah,
but for the most part, I mean, that's again, it's it was funny because afterwards I was talking to my mom, right? And she was like, "Oh, you seem like kind of down," and she was talking to me a bit about it. And yeah, I said, "Yeah, but it's okay, right?" And then afterwards, she was like, "Oh, you're sad about." I'm like, "I'm not sad anymore." She's like, "You just turned around." I'm like, "Yeah." just because I go through a little bit of sadness doesn't mean I need to be sad all day, right?
That's
Or
right.
I say I go through sadness. It's really just a process, right? There's some sadness
Just
there.
the
Okay, we can
body.
see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's really just the body. It's these conditionings, and like again, it's sort of like for me, or I say it's like looking and being like, it's okay to be sad for a little bit, right? But
Yeah,
then
yeah,
also
yeah.
get over it. I can be glad too. Like,
Yeah, and being sad can be kind of fun.
yeah,
It adds some artistic spice to life. It doesn't have to be something even to run away from, as long as you're not physically acting out on these things to cause more dukkha for other people. If you can be okay with sadness, anger, fear, delusion being spices of life, then what's the problem? You know what I mean? As long as you're not hurting yourself or others. Um, yeah. It's but then again, like, but also in that same hand, it's not falling down the whole slope of sadness.
yeah,
It's riding the wave of sadness as opposed to letting the wave of sadness crash you into the corals. It's being one with life, even though as cliche as it sounds, it's being one with life. And not, when you hear about the Dhamma, when you get into the practice, in almost the wisdom, our natural wisdom that's there from the beginning, once we're hearing of these things, once we're hearing of the Dhamma, it almost brings us into an autopilot. Because it's like, just like you were saying, you were sad. It's like the fact that we already are aware of wisdom, in a weird way, it's almost like you don't even need to practice, because however you feel, it's okay. It's like there's nothing that needs to be done. It's like just hearing about the Dhammas can almost free one. Like, like sure you have to practice, and you'll always be practicing, but that's kind of the practice, is like, well, if you're okay with life as it is, then what's there to change? It's like the person who wants to change being sad is not okay with being sad once in a while. And
yeah,
those are the most sad people. Those are the most depressed people. It's like, I don't like this feeling. I want things to be different. But our natural wisdom is like, just from practicing the Dhamma, is like, yeah, you're gonna feel sad. Well, that's chemicals in the body, and it can even be something that's artistic and fun. It doesn't need to be something we have to get rid of. And then you're like, oh, 2 seconds later, I'm not sad anymore because I'm okay with being sad. Like sometimes
yeah,
it even
yeah.
feels good. Like,
Well, yeah, that's it, And I think like again, yeah, it's like the balance, right? Where it's like, I mean, most of the time, right, it's like directing the mind towards the wholesome and really being like chill with that and like feeling good and like, yeah, you know what? I don't have to I don't have to go there, right? That's most of the time, right? But here, but sometimes it's just like, hey, you know what? Let's go and see that sadness and be like, well, actually, it's not really worth um continually going on about this either, right? So I'm like, okay, you know what? Right now it's safe to do so. We're just gonna we're just gonna go in the sadness for a moment and then be like, yeah, it's not really worth it. But there's still, again, yeah, that wisdom going on of this doesn't need to ruin the whole day. This doesn't need to be a forever thing. Even the thoughts that come up, they're delusional thoughts. They can be seen as
yeah,
delusional thoughts. It's like, yeah, sadness is something that's kind of arising, but it's going it's not impersonal still, like all this stuff, like
yeah,
even as these thoughts of wanting things and all this other stuff, it's all seen as impersonal, right? It's like really at the end of the day, and like it's also having that knowledge of like, none of these things really do lead to happiness, right? But it's weird because like I say it's weird. I mean, it really just is what it is, right? Because weirdness is just a perception that I'm throwing on or that's being thrown upon it. But in reality, right, it's like it really is just what it is, right? But then there can even be a subtle aversion to that, like of with that sort of, one could say like empty, sort of aspect. You know how folks are like, oh, I feel empty inside, right? And it's like, I mean, I can notice that with myself from time to time, or even with, practicing this, there's like that comes up, right? But the problem is not that, well, the reason that there's a problem is because there's an aversion to things being, that emptiness, that void, or what have you, like that sort of feeling. It's like there's an aversion to it, right? Because it's like, oh well,
Yeah.
but what about this? What about my who I am as a person and all these things, and making those things important, right? And it's like, oh well, if there isn't that, then there's no meaning or what have you, and then that means that there needs to be an issue, right? But it's the aversion to all these things. When the aversion goes away, when the wanting goes away, then there's no problem, right? And so it's like that
Yeah.
understanding of that, which is like really quite, I mean, is liberating in a very profound way, because it touches on things at such a,
Yeah.
the heart of the matter, where other things might not. They're really trying to go with the symptoms, right? As opposed to like getting to the heart of the matter here. And that's, yeah, I mean, that's the profound thing
Hmm.
about the Dhamma, where it's freeing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you say to yourself, like, okay, who needs meaning? Ironically, in a way, in a sense, all this meaning comes flooding in that moment, and it's always with you if you want it to have it. It's like the kingdom of heaven is there, but we don't see the kingdom of heaven because of bad habits, because of our karma, sankharas. We don't see these things. We don't. Um, and that's why sometimes in Zen that they put sometimes a lot of emphasis on the physical world, but what they're really saying is just how we do the Eightfold Path with the Anapanasati. They're bringing it back to earth. They're bringing it back to the elements, bringing it back to the breath. And it's not that thoughts and feelings, emotions aren't, they're all part of the Dhamma, although they may be at closer inspection somewhat illusory. It's all the Dhamma. And like when you are chopping vegetables, when you are gardening, the Buddha was like, pay attention to these moments, observe these moments, because look at the stark contrast. A minute ago, you had all these illusion things in your head. That's fine. But when you're gardening, do you notice how those go away? And that's the same thing as anapanasati. When you're following the breath, do you notice how there can be clarity, there can be peace? Do you see that? And then you don't take going back, and you always have to naturally kind of have those baby dukkha's arise, aka thoughts, feelings, emotions that we uh, may see as anger, hatred, delusion, fear, doubt. And when they come up, we're like, oh, but that's okay that they're coming up. That's all part of this whole thing we call life. Then it's just like, oh, I can live with these, like Dhammarato said, these are your friends, these, hello, old friend, it's good to see you again. And it's not taken personally, it's not taken as something to run away from or fight. Um, and it's yeah, and when you see an old friend, it's just like, oh, hey, what's up, It's like there's no problems here. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's, if you want to talk about meaning, there's all the meaning it right there and right here in this moment of being content, being satisfied. When you go beyond both meaning nor the idea of no meaning
Mm.
whatsoever, that's the true meaning. It's when, who needs meaning? Who cares? Who cares about what meaning? What, I'm going to find some answer and then I'll be satisfied. It's like, no, the feeling of being satisfied is the meaning. It's like the
Yeah.
ultimate, not needing anything, not needing to be satisfied 1 minute or not satisfied 1 minute. It's like whatever happens, you're fine.
Yeah, yeah, that's why it's, yeah, nice to come back to just like being okay, right? So it's like, if sadness comes up, hey, that's okay, if one is feeling joy, right, that's okay, right? But coming back to, hey, it's okay, and then just being able to chill with what is, and coming back, yeah, again to reality, like you're saying, it's like it transcends the whole meaning, non-meaning sort of thing, which
Right.
can get very heady, and that's where like,
Confusing.
yeah, it's like just waking up to what's going on in reality. That's where like coming back to the breath frequently is very helpful too, or anything to
Yeah.
get out of that, again, over intellectualization and just being like, okay, no, back to this.
Yeah.
And when it's like, that's the thing is like, it doesn't matter whether or not there is, meaning or not. If one sees that there is no meaning and they're averse to that, or there is a meaning that they don't like, or what have you, and this is all being fabricated, right? Then there's going to be dissatisfaction. But if one's just like, hey, I don't, care about that, right? Because
Yeah.
in all honesty, the real, again, yeah, the real meaning is, hey, there's dissatisfaction and there's the end of dissatisfaction. And once we see can just come back and be satisfied, there you go, right? So then
Yeah.
the question doesn't really, it's not as potent, right? And it's cool. And I mean, that's the thing, because this, I mean, that's the thing with the Dhamma, is that it actually leads back to a resolution, if you will, in the way that I mean, really, other things just can't, because it's just not the way that reality works in that regard, right? So
Yeah.
it's like people can philosophize forever about these things, but coming back to just being satisfied, coming back to reality and what is really felt, in that regard. I
Yeah.
mean, in terms of our experience, right? Yeah.
It's almost sometimes as if people through society's brainwashing have become accustomed to almost being afraid of peace, of satisfaction. And they label it such things as boredom. They label it as monsters and it becomes these monsters. They label it as lazy. They label it as sloth, boredom, all these things. And there is lazy, and then there's in a way one could say like a noble lazy. It's not lazy at all. Like the Buddha, he got so much
Mhm.
stuff done, and it's not about doing things or not doing things. It's about when you're practicing, things will naturally happen as they should. You know,
Yeah.
a, a Buddhist father is not going to neglect his daughter or son. That would go against you know what I mean? But he's
Yeah.
also not going to drive himself nuts by fixating on anxieties about the future for his children, or you know what I mean.
Yeah.
When things arise, he'll take care of it and do the best he can, and they'll either go the way that they're supposed to or not, and that's the way they're supposed to. They're going to go any way out of his control. So, but yeah, that's all just man. It's just I'm just so thankful and blessed that yeah, I met Dhammarato and I'm able to even practice this stuff because you really do see how you can be living in a world of illusion if you otherwise haven't. And when you talk to people who don't practice the Dhamma, you see it clearly, like the Buddha said, like once in a while, check out other people, how they're fixated on all these things and you're unattached. One, because you're not them. So there's a natural unattachment, but that's why it's a good practice. Because look how they freak out about losing their car keys or whatever, and look how unattached you are. But when it's your car keys, then you're the same as them. But see how crazy they're acting from somebody who has no skin in the game. You can see how maybe they'll find their car keys, maybe they won't, but they shouldn't be freaking out as much as it because
Hmm.
it's causing them a lot of dukkha. It seems, you know. But it's just wonderful that the choice is always there, that you don't have to suffer. You don't have to have dissatisfaction. There's always the choice. You can change it. And that is a profound thing that is easily missed.
Hmm. When you say too, like the choice is there, that you don't have to suffer, that makes me think of like the rules as well, right? Like there can be from these rules, like, oh, I have to suffer because of this. I have to be
Yeah.
dissatisfied, right? And it kind of goes back to sometimes, you're talking about laziness, right? And even when we're thinking about like the hindrances, right? And there's like sloth and torpor, right? And I think that again is kind of like in regards to, the practice, and not applying, sometimes, or what have you. But
Hmm.
also we have this thing where we can't be restful, right? This is more the issue, right? Where it's like, there's such a thing where it's like you need to be doing more and more, and you have to be, constantly doing more and more, and this is not
Yeah,
enough, right? And you can't just sit down and relax and come to rest, right? Because again, another hindrance is restlessness, right? And so this is again
that's
something
right.
that's keeping the mind from being able to be satisfied, is restlessness, that boredom, that anxiety. And so actually, I think in a way it's not laziness, but it's restfulness, actually being able to rest, you know, and
And the
that's it.
yeah,
Yeah.
the middle way too. It's like
Mm,
you can be anxiety ridden about being a overworker, workaholic, or you can sit there. But I think somebody with fresh Western ears who's never heard of the Dhamma, if they hear the rules of things like, it can't be lazy, no sloth,
mm,
topor or whatever, they'll say, oh, they agree with the Western mindset. Then we always must be doing something. Well, don't be lazy with your Dhamma practice.
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
like don't be dissatisfied. That's really what that means. And in the middle way, if your kuti is falling apart, it's nothing bad to make some repairs and keep it looking pleasant so other people don't have an eyesore to look at. But at the same sense, you're not fixated on every second. Oh, I got to make my house perfect. I got to fix everything. It's the middle way.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah,
fixing
precisely.
things when they require it, naturally. Everything. And that's the funny thing about the Dhamma is when you're practicing it earnestly, there's no questions or rules of how should I, when should I, how it all kind of just naturally happens. It's there. That's when we become the adults. We don't need someone to tell us when to fix our cooties, when not to, when to read the Pali Canon, when not to, when to feel this way, when to feel that. It's like, no, we're in charge and we're in a balanced way being satisfied, and nobody can tell us that we're not. Like,
Yeah.
there's no owner of us, like, telling us we're adults. And when things arise, we handle them. And the chips and cards will fall where they may, and that's fine. And that's a big problem a lot of people seem to have, or they've created this so-called problem, is that um, they have a very psychological sankara fixated habit of wanting to control every damn thing.
Mhm.
You see it in our Western medicine, you see it in our architecture, you see it in uh, every facet of uh, modernity. Um, Even in people's, it's funny, I was just gardening, but you see it even in people's yards. Can't have any weeds, it has to be perfect. It's always fighting nature. Like, I can't have a beard, I have to shave it, right? I have to cut my hair, I can't let that stuff. It's like we're always, and it's not that you can't cut your hair or do it, but my point is we're always, a lot of people in society are always fixated on fighting against what is. You know what I mean? Like, it can't be this way. It can't be this natural way. I must change it, right? Because when I'm changing it, that means that I have some level of control. But
Mhm.
really, it's just ignorance. You have a tiny, tiny bit of control, and 99% of stuff is completely just the way things are. And just like the idea of a permanent self, or the self in general, to be honest with you, like Buddhadasa Bhikkhu talks about in Heartwood of the Bodhi Tree, like the ego, more so of the self. And it's, yeah, it's there. There's a kind of a self, but it's not very important. It's the fixation on this ego. It's the fixation on the idea of self that's causing the dukkha. Wanting to make it permanent, wanting to make it special, wanting to make it something that you can build statues to and monuments to after the body dies. Like, this is just silly ignorance. None of those things are necessary. Even the breath is not necessary. When we die, we're just going to be the same old, I would assume, peaceful selves. How could we not be ourself? Because there is just this, you know. But when we have a fixation on a body and identity, then there becomes something to lose. Then there becomes something to maintain. But when we go beyond that, we go beyond birth and death, in a way, both figuratively and literally. Because if I'm not the body, then who is it that's dying? Who is it that gets sick? Who is it that does anything? It's reminds me of the Advaita Vedantins. I love reading about that stuff. I love reading about Nisargadatta Maharaj. I don't know if you're familiar with him. One of my other teachers actually studied with him in India, which is cool. Are you familiar with Nisargadatta at all?
I feel like I've heard that name, but not incredibly familiar now.
He's just an Indian saint who like ran a little what do they call those things? Biddies, or yeah, those Indian cigarettes. He had a little Indian cigarette shop, but in the evening he would have basically Dhamma talks. He was a cool dude. Highly recommended. Nisargadatta Maharaj. And hello BV.
Hello.
How are you?
Namaskar. I'm very well.
Namaskar. And what's your name, dude? I can't see it on the
Bante.
Bante. Cool, man. How are you doing? Oh, hey, buddy. I know you.
Hey.
How's it going, dude?
Hey, DJ. Hey, Bante. Am I saying it right? Bante?
Yeah, you're saying it right.
Hey.
I wish we can all have one global name. You know, let's all call each other brother. So much better. Oh, either way is fine, I guess. If you want to keep your names, keep them.
Is Dhammarato coming to this meeting?
I don't believe so.
I
Would be
think
nice,
he's-
but he's already so busy on Saturdays and Fridays and Sundays, and got to give the guy a rest once in a while. Yeah. Yeah. But that would be lovely, though. Definitely. So is there anything you guys want to talk about? Me and DJ just been kind of chatting about the Dhamma.
That's great. No. Nothing particular.
That's good. When there's nothing particular to chat about, that means that there's usually not that many problems or disturbances in our minds. So that's pretty sweet. But have you guys ever read any Ajahn Sumedho or listened to any of his talks?
Yeah.
No.
Ajahn Sumedho is, like an arahat. He's a very great master. So
Yeah.
that's an underrated practice for American or Western people who are concerned with the path. There's all these arahats out there, or Sotapanna, or what have you, that are giving Dhamma talks, and people just don't listen to those, and they're really missing out on like constant development in their lives, and being
Yes.
informed by wisdom.
Yeah.
So I hope more people will start to do that. But a lot
Yeah.
of people just don't understand that that exists, and that that's out there.
Yeah. That's kind of why I mentioned it, because I like to put these wonderful teachers who I could only learn from sometimes in books or YouTube videos. But there's a lot of people, there's such a wealth of wisdom, and sometimes we miss out. And it's a great practice just to listen to their wholesome Dhamma talks. For Ajahn Sumedho, if anybody has Spotify, he has a whole library of podcasts of Dhamma talks, and they are wonderful, and they last long. They'll go from hour and a half, 2 hours sometimes. So it's a real great blessing to be amongst such wonderful teachers, because there's a lot of people who aren't aware of them, and there's a lot of people who may go their whole lives without even hearing about such things. So in that way, we're all blessed to have even heard about the Dhamma and the Eightfold Noble Path and the Four Noble Truths of dukkha, nirodha, dissatisfaction and ending dissatisfaction. Our ability to change dissatisfaction into satisfaction is really quite a superpower, to be able to change dissatisfaction into satisfaction. And in other videos, I've called it like the holy alchemy of turning lead into gold, and it really is far more valuable than if you could turn lead into gold, because we've all seen people who have won the lottery or gotten rich suddenly, and then before you know it, they have family members coming out of the woodwork wanting to rip them off of their money and manipulate them and lie to them. You have people suing them for certain things, so they get everybody wants a little piece of that money, and they quickly learn, man, I thought this was supposed to solve everything. And sometimes it adds more problems, more things to look out for. It reminds me of a story there was like, I think it was a Zen monk or somebody had a teacup that somebody get. I don't know if Ajahn Chah told this story or not, but anyways, this beautiful story. He just was talking about a monk who got a teacup, and somebody gave it to him as a gift. But when he had the teacup, he didn't have any other possessions. He only had this brand new, very beautiful teacup that his friend gave him. And the whole time he had it, he was washing it, and it was very fragile. So he had to, put it in his bag and make sure his arm was always around it in case he bumped into a tree or a branch or something or fell. But after a couple of weeks, he gave the teacup away to somebody, and he was just like, oh, so glad to get rid of that rock, that burden. And after he said that, he thought it was funny how this little beautiful teacup at first seemed like such a lovely gift, ended up to be such a burden. He almost had to get to a certain point where you almost want it to break so you can be free of trying to protect it. like I was perfectly fine before this teacup. Now I have, but sometimes dissatisfaction comes in nice little beautiful packages,
Yeah.
And if we're not aware of them, we sometimes will acquire one teacup and then another one and then this and then a jacket and then a car and then a house, and before you know it, you're living a whole life of trying to protect things that are causing you great dissatisfaction when there's no need for it whatsoever, really. I used to watch Zen videos on YouTube of particularly this one called Amongst White Clouds. Have any of you ever seen that documentary?
No, I haven't seen that one. Amongst White
Yeah.
Clouds?
I
It's
was
called
close to seeing
Amongst
it.
White Clouds. Oh, you're close to seeing it?
Yeah, I watched it like just the cover, Like, oh, nice. No.
Yeah, that happens sometimes. Sometimes the covers are more interesting than the actual. But in this case, it was a wonderful documentary, and as I'm watching it, you see these Zen hermits that live in these mountains in China, and they're just kind of carrying on these traditions of hermits who are wearing robes that have been cast off by other monks. They're like building their little huts out of stone. And I would watch this documentary over and over for 15 years. I think that's how long it's been around. And I would find myself ask myself, like, what's fascinating me about this? And what always fascinated me about it was that the ability people have to live in complete isolation in the forest and be completely content. And when I told myself that's why you're watching this over and over, because when you see a man living alone in the woods who is completely satisfied, it's not even so much about the environment, but just to see anybody who can be completely satisfied with so little is just very inspiring, and a very inspiring piece of Dhamma artwork. Great movie, highly recommend it, Amongst White Clouds. So you don't really need too much in this life to be satisfied. Ajahn Chah used to say, if I wake up and I have my bowl of rice, if I have water, then what else could I possibly need? Nothing else need be here.
So you've got to sacrifice to experience that, otherwise you will know about it. So find a ways to sacrifice, and then you experience that for yourself, that, oh, all these things that I think are giving me freedom or pleasure, all these things that I think I need, they are not like actually giving you freedom or real pleasure, just like something like masturbating or eating food. It's not
Hey, what's
really
wrong with that?
sustaining for the long term. Well, it's not wrong or right. It just has an effect,
I'm just joking.
and
I'm just joking.
and you may miss
Yeah.
out on so much, so much of the real joys of life, because you don't sacrifice much, and then what you do is just kind of live in a maze of desires, and then the corresponding fears. So if you sacrifice, then you also give up the maze, and you give up the desires, you give up the fears. And when you're not in a maze and you're not controlled by desire and fear, then you can have so many interesting experiences concerned with the Dhamma and Buddhism and different places in the world or meditation centers, etc. Because there's like a line that people draw where, yeah, I'm interested in this stuff, but ultimately, I'm going to be a businessman. And the point of the Dhamma is that that's not going to work. So, while you're still young and you still have that openness, not too much filial responsibility, you sacrifice, and you go outside of your bounds. And then, of course, if you want to come back to it, as a young kind of Western influenced, intelligent person who knows about the Dhamma, you can go away for 5 years and come back, and you'll be the same age as you were now, because you won't be so stressed, and then you can do it. So I take the approach, like, sacrifice as much as you can, as soon as you can, and have experiences concerned with the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And then, what you want to do moving forward, you will have more power to do that.
Yeah, sacrifice. If I was going to sacrifice anything, if I had a choice, it would be sacrificing the idea of an I, me, my mind. To give up wanting things to be different than they are. To give up wanting something that I don't have. That's the sacrifice I want to give, is this craving. I can sacrifice this ego craving to the fire, and that's the only sacrifice I need to do, because anything else is just going to cause me more dissatisfaction.
The issue in that is that it's easy to trick ourselves and kind of justify what we're doing. So when you renounce materially, or when you renounce the things that you think are unnecessary to renounce, or kind of are useful, then you see very clearly the Dhamma of what you have and what you are, used to is not permanent and reliable. So when you give that up, then you experience the subtlety of the grasping, the desire. But if you stay in this kind of box that you've created for yourself, and then you think about this highest peace or this highest renunciation, it becomes a way of perpetuating, what you're already involved with, and the level that you're already at. And Buddhism is really about getting to a higher level, so that you can help more people, so that you can, be more peaceful, be more free from suffering.
Who needs to get to a higher level? I don't need to. I'm satisfied right here on the ground. Right here where I am. And if we're satisfied, in my opinion, that's one of the best ways we can help others. Because when we're satisfied, more people will naturally be drawn toward you. More people will kind of naturally want to hear what you have to say, if you have anything to say at all. But getting too wrapped up in the over-intellectualization of it, getting too wrapped up in rites and rituals and beliefs and being and becoming and I, me, mine, it's just more mountain climbing, race running, And I think I don't need to be the best Dhamma practitioner. I don't need to be the best helper of friends. I don't need to be anything.
And to embody that state is to be a sotapanna, or to be an arahat, etc. But to think about that, or like appropriate that understanding, to fixate on that idea as a justification for perpetuating our, our craving and our desire, is more normal than becoming a sotapanna, or, becoming enlightened, which is what those teachings are pointing to.
Yeah, and who needs to be a arahant or a sotapanna or enlightened? It's not necessary. Not necessary at all. We don't have we don't have to become anything different than what we already are. We don't need to be anywhere than right here, right now.
Sure, and I mean, we can say also that it's not necessary to die, but see how that works out for you. So
who is it that will die? Is the body?
Well, it's not someone. It's not someone is already. So that's having faith in the Dhamma, right? That there isn't someone who could become anything anyway, right? That's not what Buddhism or becoming a sotapanna is about. It's not about someone becoming something, because that's impossible.
Yeah, so whether we become something or don't become something, or die or don't die, it doesn't really matter. Well, the only thing that matters is being satisfied here and now. Nothing else is of any real importance. But if other people want to chase things and chase ideas and notions and things in their mind, they're more than free to.
Well, they're not free because they do that.
Right, but they're free to go chase that stuff. In that sense, they're free. Not going to have much satisfaction, but hey, yeah, that's okay. We don't have to be the saviors of mankind.
Yeah, because the Buddha already is, in a certain sense.
Yeah, in a sense. Yeah, he's a nice man that lived a while ago, and his friends wrote down some very beautiful things. Let's see. Yeah.
I remember we were once talking with Dhammarato on a call, and he came up with this question, this basic question, like, is it relevant if the Buddha existed? Like, would it change anything right now? Like, if the Buddha was real or not? So,
Yeah.
in the end, it's like, yeah, well, I have the Dhamma. I only have Dhammarato and the Sangha to thank for, well, Dhammarato for introducing me to it, and my Sangha friends, my Sangha brothers and sisters for keeping me wide awake and focusing on the breath. And that's like, well, that's the only thing that really matters to me right now, like the Buddha might be real or might not be real. Like, he could be just like, five monks, like, okay, we need people to practice this shit. It's awesome, man. How are we gonna do it? Okay, let's invent a superhuman being and let's try to solve that. He would say, but in the end, it's right now
Siddhartha,
that matters.
yeah, Siddhartha was a dude, and
there are thousands of spiders on my boat.
whoa, thousands of fighters on my boat. Yes, I'm very thankful that the Buddha existed because he showed us the correct ways to practice. But like I've said in other videos too, we have Buddhadasa Bhikkhu, we have Dhammarato, and like Dhammarato has told us, or what I listened to recently, it's like these teachers, they're nice guides, and he was saying like, but they all at the end of the day still kind of stand on clay feet. We have to be adults and kind of take the reins over from just regurgitating, just doing what other people are doing, and find out for ourselves the best way to be satisfied here and now. And when we're listening to these wonderful teachers that have come before us, we're grateful and we recognize their wisdom, but ultimately it's just words until we look in our hearts and see for ourselves that we don't have to chase these illusions, these cognitive illusions any longer. We can come back to the breath, come back to reality, come back to here and now. And the ideas of sotapannas and people who are enlightened and not enlightened, or religious people that do it correctly or don't do it correctly, or black and white, up and down, all these things fade away and they're meaningless.
Well,
You're
I think we have to
satisfied.
be quite. I think we have to be quite careful about that because we're so delusional actually, and we have so many wrong views and subtle grasping and craving. I mean, are you suffering or are you enlightened? Are you at peace or are you is your life a mess? Is there a lot of difficulty and errors and things that you'd like to change, right? So subtly in the mind and in our experience, we have our own kind of religion. And so the reason we don't have a faith in Buddhism is because we have so much faith in our own grasping and craving religion inside of ourselves. So Buddhism gives us a system in which to be free from that. So developing faith in the Buddhist teachings and then applying them is how we, kind of don't allow our subtle, complicated, kind of nightmare of our mind to control us and to run our life. Because yeah, we can talk about things, we can think about things, we can intellectually understand the Dhamma, but it's a very different thing between experiencing the truth or practicing the Dhamma and having an intellectual understanding of it. And the more that you strive to meditate or to practice seriously or be around well-known meditation masters, etc. That's how you kind of test. You see what is my mind, because it's easy to say I'm at peace while you're in the bathtub, smoking weed or whatever people do. But it's much more difficult to know about your mind in a situation like that, to actually know about your mind. So I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. I don't take refuge in my understanding about things because I'm not a Buddha, because I'm not enlightened. That doesn't mean that I'm not practicing to be at peace or to be content, or it certainly doesn't mean I'm chasing after, like ideals of enlightenment, but it means I recognize how faulty my own understanding is. And so I don't take refuge in that. I take refuge in the Sangha. I take refuge in Sotapanna. I take refuge in Arhats, and that part of the Buddha's teaching is very important because it gives us a standard in which to detach from ourselves, and detach from, like, people say, hey, I'm wealthy, or hey, I can make poetry, or hey, I can talk about things in, a really interesting way. But do they actually know the truth experientially, and do they embody that? And so those labels, those notions are just pointing to the experiential embodiment of the Dhamma.
Yeah, gladdening the mind here and now, like the Buddha taught, dukkha dukkha nirodha, dissatisfaction and the end of dissatisfaction. And that's basically all he taught, or the most important thing he taught. So if you're satisfied, everything else is just conceptual white noise, just conceptual. Like on the TV, they'd show that white noise, that snow, that kind of shh. Everything else is that outside of being satisfied, because anything else outside of that is just more constructing of wanting to get somewhere where you're not, wanting to be something you're not, become something you're not. But if you're satisfied, it's not very complex. It's kind of simple. Anybody can do it. Anybody can gladden their mind here now. You don't have to take your life so personally. You don't have to take things so seriously. That's why it's fun to say things like, who cares about Buddhism? Who cares about the Dhamma? Who cares about any of this stuff? We're just having fun. We're just relaxing. And we learn in these ways of speaking, these wholesome, nurturing ways of speaking, that we come back to reality outside of these concepts that we were holding on to so dearly. We come back to, oh yeah, I can make jokes about the Dhamma. I can make jokes about Buddhism. I'm not attached to any of this stuff. I have a lightness about me. And that's where, if there was a true nature, that, to me, that's where that would be, in satisfaction. And gladdening the mind here and now, coming back to reality, the physical reality of the breath, outside of these conceptual notions that are always going to be part of the body, and that's okay. And we rinse and repeat.
Well,
Congratulate
there's
ourselves.
satisfaction of dukkha nirodha, and then there's satisfaction of eating cheeseburgers or taking opiates or things like that. And oftentimes the satisfaction that people talk about in a worldly way is just about pleasantness. It's not about the cessation of suffering. So it's something to watch out for, because a lot of people are pleasuring themselves and, feel relaxed after eating a cheeseburger, but I'm not sure that's what the Buddha was talking about.
I love cheeseburgers. Well, that's probably where we differ, because I would say that's exactly what he's talking about. Not so much going after sense pleasures, but getting to a place of satisfaction where you're not obsessing over rules. You're not obsessing over right and wrong ways to do things. You have an idea, you have a guide, and there's also the idea of the middle way. It's not wrong to enjoy eating a cheeseburger, but you might want to also enjoy drinking water once in a while. You might also want to enjoy a day where you're not eating, you know. But there's nothing wrong with the enjoyment of eating something. There's something wrong in the attachment to it. There's something wrong if you're dissatisfied with not having it. Then there would need to be a change that needs to be made.
On the yesterday call, was it yesterday, DJ? Or was it the day before? We were talking about this, like the meal and what the Dhammapada says to be indulgent with the food. So I asked DJ, and he really enlightened me with that, and it was like, yeah, well, it's not about the sensual pleasure of eating, what I'm chasing, but actually knowing that eating nurtures my body, and it brings brings it to a nice place. Like, yeah, it's not the same to eat the cheeseburger 5 times a day than to eat it once. You know, like
one
leads my body to a healthy place. It allows me to practice more efficiently, to say it in
It's
a
a
way.
good idea, but the Buddha teaches us to develop revulsion and disgust for the body. So this is, once again, more of like a worldly approach to the Dhamma. The body is unsatisfactory. The body is on fire with greed, hatred, and delusion, with distress, with anxiety. We have to be kind of ready to experience the suffering of the body and the unsatisfactoriness of the body before we can know what the Buddha taught about.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in a state where you feel as though you still need answers and are still questioning things, or feel that you're satisfied or feel that you're dissatisfied, you know, all I can say is the only thing that exists is right now. And can we be satisfied right now, or can't we? And if we're in a state where we're saying, well, I can't be satisfied, I need to make more sacrifices, and I have to feel guilty about what I did yesterday, or this sense pleasure that I did, that's just more dukkha.
Yeah.
But
and
if
at
we
the same
can,
time,
go ahead.
Yeah,
DJ.
no, if one is like, okay, I want to have, this cheeseburger right now, I want to have this sense pleasure, and various different things, that's to be recognized and thrown out. That the pleasure that is born from sense pleasure is crude. It is not, actually worthwhile, really, right? So I think there is, definitely, if one is, consuming food, right, it is to remember that, hey, this is just for sustaining the practice, right? Again, the Buddha is about the middle way, right? So again, we eat the food to sustain the practice, but again, indulging in the flavor, being like, oh my gosh, this is so wonderful. It's actually, in one way, it's better to rather gain the joy from the actual fact that this pleasure is not worthwhile. We need it just for sustaining the practice, right? So I do find that to help definitely with the consistency of being able to come back, throughout the day, to wake up here and now and be like, I can be happy without these things, right? So it is helpful to, I think, guard the senses in that regard, So I think there's definitely something that is, respectable about that. But again, we can do that also moment to moment. Like right now, we can become aware of that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but there's also kind of a sky daddy sense of, help me, Father, tell me what I should and shouldn't eat. Tell me how I should and shouldn't behave. Let me give up my autonomy to something that, please. At some point, those are good guidelines. But at some point, we must grow up and think for ourselves.
Oh yeah, no, but this is this is directly also discerning it. Again, it's like, yeah, we have the confidence, right? Or we develop that with the teachings of the Buddha, right? With the Four Noble Truths, with, hey, the Buddha, did go out there. The Buddha did do the hard work. Like, he went out there, he practiced extreme asceticism, and he was also on the opposite side in his early life, right? With extreme sense pleasure, like, especially for the time, being a prince, right? And so he goes out, he does the hard work, and he has the middle way, right? And so he shares it with us. He goes through that, and he's like, okay, this is how to practice, right? And so we take that upon faith, right? And then that becomes confidence as we continue to practice. So again, it's not saying, like, if you're eating something and you're like feeling shame and guilt and all this stuff because you're eating something, no. Also, if you're like, oh, well, I'm eating, somebody gives you something, somebody offers you some food, and you're like, well, this isn't the exact health food that I want for my body because my body needs to be beautiful, and you're not going into the gratitude aspect of it, right? That can also be a thing. So we can have a lot of things when it comes to food like that. But to recognize that the food is just to sustain the body. It's about, though, not coming from a rule, but coming from the wisdom that this actually, is more fulfilling, right? That the sense pleasures are not fulfilling. I mean, this is a pretty, like, they're just not, right? And so as we continue to practice throughout our lives to see that, and that's something where, like, yeah, if somebody, like Bhante, right, is a monk and, goes off, is really embodying that in terms of, actually practicing that. And so if somebody is, a householder, right, again, I think it is wise to be on guard, again, not from a place of constant fear or what have you, but to keep looking, keep discerning, keep changing, right? And then coming back to, I can be happy without these things, right?
So
it seems like a lot of work, though. No.
Sutta here from the Buddha. There are mendicants, these two kinds of happiness. What two? The happiness of lay people and the happiness of renunciates. These are the two kinds of happiness. The better of these two kinds of happiness is the happiness of renunciants. There are mendicants, these two kinds of happiness. What two? Sensual happiness and the happiness of renunciation. These are the two kinds of happiness. The better of the two kinds of happiness is the happiness of renunciation. And then it goes on the happiness of attachments, the happiness of no attachments, defiled happiness and undefiled happiness, and happiness of the flesh and happiness not of the flesh, and noble happiness and ignoble happiness, physical happiness and mental happiness, happiness with rapture and happiness free of rapture, happiness with pleasure and happiness with equanimity, etc. So I think the question becomes, what is renunciation? And how do we practice renunciation actively, towards all the phenomena and involvements that are in our lives? And I speak as a Buddhist. I'm following the teachings of the Buddha. I'm not. I don't really see it as a sky daddy, but more like the true teacher that I follow. As a Buddhist monk and as a someone who identifies as a Buddhist. And when I look at the suttas, it seems that this is the guidance for ending suffering. So that's why I follow it. That's been my experience with it.
Yeah. Well, that's very good that you do that. And I would never tell anybody to not do things that is bringing them satisfaction, because I don't happen to particularly practice that style or that way. So if you enjoy calling yourself a Buddhist, and if you enjoy worshiping, so to speak, Lord Buddha, I think that's wonderful. And there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But for myself, I should have a little tattoo on my forehead or sign around my neck when I start any type of video calls. It's, I'm not the best Dhamma practitioner. I'm not the best scholar. I'm not an enlightened person. I'm not, I don't need to be anything. And in that way, I feel very satisfied. And that's kind of my practice, is that I don't need to be a good Dhamma teacher. I don't need to be a good this or a good that. If I'm satisfied naturally, I don't need anything. So I don't even need to win arguments or debates. So if anybody has their own personal beliefs that bring them satisfaction, I think that's wonderful. And I would definitely tell people to continue doing what they feel in their heart.
Well, I don't think that any kind of beliefs bring satisfaction. I think the Buddha teaches us not to rely on beliefs and, frankly, not to rely on ideas about our experience. But it seems to me that there's a very strong habit energy to conceive about things that I see or hear or experience mentally or physically. So the training that the Buddha teaches is to not conceive about things. And that's kind of a very intensive and active process, to not conceive. I don't think anyone needs to do anything, but the Buddha found out that you do need to die, and you do need to, deal with sickness and old age as well, and that's a kind of natural situation that you're in as a human being. And so I don't think the Buddha became enlightened because he needed to, but because he recognized what his body and mind were subject to, and that him being subject to conditions was unsatisfactory, and that the Buddha would not stop until he was satisfied or until he was free, so which led to the Buddha's enlightenment.
Yeah, well, if whatever floats your boat.
Well, as long as we can make it to the other shore, we can put down the boat. But if we don't think that there's another shore, or that we are on the path, then we probably shouldn't call ourselves a Buddhist or represent ourselves as being involved with Buddhism. That may be confusing for people if someone doesn't believe in the Dhamma, but represents themselves as being a Buddhist teacher or someone who knows about it. That may be more like a Zen thing, I suppose, but Zen's not really a thriving tradition anymore. And Dhammarato seems to be more involved with early Buddhist texts, the Theravada Sangha, helping people to ordain and get in touch with meditation centers. And Dhammarato seems to be very informed by the early Buddhist scriptures and all that kind of stuff.
Well, all I know is that I don't know nothing.
Only don't know, straight ahead.
Yeah, and Dhammarato is very knowledgeable about Buddhist history, different vocabulary words in the Pali Canon. But one of the best things he ever taught me was don't rely too much on being a scholar or reading certain types of books, but rather he would tell me the best book to read is between my two ears. So that's what I do, and that's what I try to follow.
First call I had with Dhammarato, I remember I was like, okay, so I've read the Dhammapada. I've read also Tibetan Buddhism. I've been reading Thich and I'm starting to read the Pali Canon in Buddha's words. And we're like, good, wow, man. Okay, wait, can you leave all that apart? Like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. And he just started talking to me and introducing me to these what I'd say is a more, well, not more, but to the actual practice of somewhere I can take, because like I'm not saying that the Pali Canon is not necessary, but well, what I really need to do is to experience it, like the Buddha did, like the Buddha experienced the renounce. He started experiencing these things. So what I really, well, in a certain way, needed to do was to experience this, and Dhammarato helped me actually guide my mind to this place where I can go like, oh yeah, I can really in a certain way, like in my own ignorance, I'm talking Mante, but um to renounce to all of these things that bring me dukkha, and actually experience dukkha nirodha and be like, yeah, I can be happy right here, right now. All of my
Yes.
life I thought, like, no man, I need to go to a monastery and into the mountains and actually experience that life so I can actually feel relieved of this, of dukkha. And well, the Dhammarato just taught me that, well, the practice actually goes inside of my mind. Like, and my mind is gonna be as crazy at it as it is in the middle of the city or in the middle of the woods. So
Yeah.
just experiencing right here, right now, for now.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the rat race of the mind and the typical Western mindset of we have to be like Rambo. We have to climb the mountains, run the race, and only then, after we do these things, we work really hard, then we get the cheese, then we get the golden carrot. Instead of looking at ourselves, we should be looking at ourselves as we're enlightened already. We can be satisfied here and now. It's within us. It's all around us. Like Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is here. But people can't let that go.
Yeah.
They have to taught, no, there's differences between this person and this person. This person works hard, therefore he gets the reward. This person doesn't, therefore he fails and starves. It's like, no, it's a game. It's an easy, fun dance. It's not meant to be work. It's easy peasy. And it's
Well,
fun.
for a lot of people, it's not easy. For a lot of people, it's really horrible, and it's certainly not fun. And really, the main principle is cause and effect, and that it does work like that. If you eat poison, you will be poisoned. If you eat the Dhamma, then you will become more free. You know, you don't need to eat poison, and you don't need to eat the Dhamma, but cause and effect are very real. And it's kind of a strange idea that most people don't believe in cause and effect, but it's quite true. And if we kind of are flippant about cause and effect, it's likely that we will spiral into lower realms and have to be there for a long time, because cause and effect is happening moment by moment in the most simple and general way. You drink soda, you get diabetes. You drink water, and
But
you don't.
where's cause and effect in this moment? Where's the hell realms and the heaven realms? Where are all these things? They're in the mind. When we come back to the breath, we're coming back to now, coming back to reality, where everything's okay. There's no need to be right. There's no need to be wrong. There's no need to get somewhere other than where we are. If we can't
Well,
find peace, satisfaction right where we are, where are we going to find it after we work harder? After we sacrifice more? It's just putting the carrot further away when it's right here. We can be happy here and now. We don't need to be so strict and serious with ourselves. We could take a breath and relax.
Well, I think there's a lot of different cases and a lot of different contexts. So for someone who's going through serious mental or emotional or otherwise issues, telling them that they can just relax, it doesn't really mean anything. And I think it's
Well,
important to understand that.
I've had some people tell me that it saved their lives. after telling them to relax. So
Well,
maybe
yes,
it doesn't.
sometimes it can be.
Maybe it may not work all
Sometimes
the
it can be very
time.
helpful.
But if the intention is good in anything we do, it can't be all that bad.
Well, I think that we have to watch out for this notion of convincing about things, and that the Buddha wasn't trying to convince us of anything.
There's no need to convince anybody of anything. If somebody's on fire and they say, "Hey, I'm on fire," I'm going to say, "Oh, there's the water." It's their choice whether or not they're going to jump in the pond or not.
Well,
It's not up to
mostly
me.
we're convincing ourselves of things. The biggest person that you're convincing of things is yourself. So that's the thing you have to watch out for, right? Is not convincing yourself about anything and just experiencing, without conceiving.
Yeah, but I think that's a little bit over intellectualizing. I think it can be explained, and there's no need to convince anybody of anything aside from if you want to practice the Noble Eightfold Path. I would suggest, just a suggestion, I'm not saying anybody has to do this or don't. If you hear of the Noble Eightfold Path and you practice it and you're earnest, chances are you're going to get good results. Convincing, I'm not in the business of convincing anybody of anything. People are free to do whatever they wish. But if they're on a Dhamma call, if they're interested in what we call a Sangha, then yeah, we're going to definitely talk Buddhism. We're going to talk Dhamma. We're going to talk truth. We're going to talk different styles. We're going to talk about all kinds of things. So it's nobody forcing anybody to do anything. It's just things that are naturally arising.
I think this cause and effect. Well, my experience has been quite polarized when I start talking to Dhammarato, obviously, because in the West the Kama is quite an almost like a bank, like an imaginary bank of actions. And yeah, well, I've been mean with this person, and then in 10 years now I'm gonna be scared because my conception of this karma will make someone else make the same thing to me that I did 10 years ago. So coming to peace with this conception of karma, karma could be like my condition, but my condition is right here, right now. Like, well, yeah, I have everything right now. Because I've already, or I am actively renouncing to it. I am actively renouncing to the essential pleasures, to all of these external factors, which then can come like this cause and effect. Bante called, like, to me, the intention becomes the cause thing. Like, yeah, my cause is, well, I have an intention to it, like, yeah, to eat healthy, to eat right now. Yeah, I'm gonna eat this fruit so my body can, so this body um can be healthy, can age well, um can, well, can be right for the things I do right now, like I do sports, um and etc etc. And so it helps me to eat
Yeah.
well. So that's the kind of like the cause I have right now, and the cause will bring an effect that's actually, well, positive to my own
You
well-being.
just need to watch out for the imaginary, because the karmic bank, right? The bank of cause and effect that we can call our body or mind, or our conditionality. It's imaginary in the same way that the money in your bank account is imaginary. And look how important that is to you, right? So we kind of have to know how to work in both worlds to stay practical, like continuously practical. Otherwise, it's justifications, it's convincing, it's conceiving specifically. And the Buddha teaches us to train ourselves in such a way where we aren't conceiving about sights or sounds or thoughts or experiences that we have, but just the seeing itself. right? In the herd, there's only the herd. In the breathing, there is only the breathing. In the experience, there is only the experience. In that idea, there is only that idea. It's not
Yeah.
something more. Yeah.
Yeah. It's Nathan who said that when I eat, I eat. When I sleep, I sleep. That's quite like
When I shit, I shit.
yeah. Yeah, like I'm drinking water. Yeah. And I
After Taco Bell, I shit.
Then people are constipated. That means they're full of it. So, we have to take the Dhamma, so that Dhamma is like a laxative, and it clears out all the debris.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but people need to be willing to take it, right? Like the cool thing about the Dhamma is that it's not well, I think I've experienced two different types of this when I share with people. When I say the word Buddha, they are not they don't seem to be experiencing aversion towards my words, but they instantly kind of like yeah, sort of aversion to it, like they push back a little a little more. And when I just talk about my own experience, like yeah, this is how, like, well, I've done this, and this happened, then this, and blah 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 blah. Like in that way, um, not in a, I really don't know what the word is, but in a less dogmatic way, in a less, yeah, the Sutta and the Buddha said, and more like, yeah, so this thing happened to me, and like I was constipated, and I did a laxant, and it made me shit like crazy, man. I felt awesome, and so that's kind of like the way I
Good job, dude.
I like to I like to spread the Dhamma, and well, to actually practice it with my mouth and mind all together. Well, I think that's something I like to do.
That's good, man. In any moment, we can choose a million reasons to be dissatisfied or a million reasons to be satisfied. The choice is ours. Give up beliefs, give up being and becoming, give up liking and disliking, and just gently resting in the way things are. Well, does anybody else have anything to say? Because I think I'm going to close it up because I got to go get my kids. But any last thoughts, feelings, questions? And thank you all for joining.
Yeah.
Yeah. As always, thank you, DJ.
Thank
Thank
Yeah,
you, BV.
enjoy being with your children.
Oh, yes, it'll be wonderful. Hopefully.
Okay.
Dasa.
Bye, everyone.
All right. Bye.
Thank you, Banze.
Thank you,
Much peace
Bante.
and love.